Welcome to the Cashflow Project podcast. Are you looking to better your financial situation by increasing your cash flow? Too busy to hunt for real estate deals or don't know where to start? Then you're in the right spot. Join us as we dive in and talk about investing for cash flow using multifamily real estate.
Welcome to the Cashflow Project podcast. I'm your host, Steve Fierros with Tri-City Equity Group. Today, I'm excited. We've got Luis Belmonte on the show. So Luis is a highly experienced real estate developer. We were just having some awesome conversation off camera about some of the crazy stories he's got, but he's got a career that spans over 57 years. He's a principal at Seven Hills Properties. He specializes in retail, multifamily, and industrial development across California. You can see his beautiful backdrop there if you're watching, the Golden Gate Bridge. And so he's based out of California, out of the Bay Area, but he's had developments in California, Oregon, Nevada. Previously, Luis was a founding partner and executive vice president at AMB Property Corporation. It's now Prologis. So a lot of these names you guys may be familiar with if you've been in the business. He's led major projects globally, including in the US, Mexico, Japan, and Singapore. Throughout his career, Luis has gained invaluable insights from his experiences, including mistakes and successes. And if we're all being honest, those a lot of times that's where we learn the best lessons, right? It's not always just the successes, but the failures as well. So excited definitely to dive into the value that I know he's got. And so, Luis, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I appreciate you taking time out of your day and hopping on with us. And I know we'll look to provide some awesome value for all of our listeners. But for those of our listeners that may be not familiar with who you are and kind of how you got started, give us a little bit of your backstory. How did you get started in real estate? Obviously, you got a ton of experience, but didn't necessarily start that way, right? So fill us in, give us a little bit of your backstory and what brought you to where you are today.
Well, I got my first start in real estate working for my father. He had a dairy farm in 1929 when the local bank closed in Yerington, Nevada, and foreclosed on his land loan and wiped out his savings account. And he ended up going back to college, working as a bootlegger to work his way through the University of Nevada, and got a job working for the government because that was the place where you could get a regular salary during the Depression. But he was always an entrepreneur at heart, and he ran cattle and poultry and had rent houses. And so my folks were divorced, but I went to live with him when I was 16. And so I became a property manager, ranch hand, and tax preparer for the family business. And then I went off to college and graduate school and ended up in the Navy. And I got out of NOM in 67. Just before TET, which was a good time to get out because I was with the first Marines who were fed into the Hawaii battle, which was a bloodbath, and I was the head of naval gunfire, which was the only fire support in Hawaii. So my ass would probably not have made it out of there. So I got home in one piece and started a corporate job, and I was living with a friend of mine from high school who was upside down in a little real estate rehab deal. He'd met some hippie in the saloon who talked him into investing some money in a little two-flat rehab deal in the Richmond district of San Francisco, and no work was going on. And so I said to my flatmate, if you'll pay me $3 an hour, I will strap on my tool belt and help you finish rehabbing this place, and you can get your money back. And he and I subsequently went into business and bought a couple more buildings. And then we did a deal. We bought a beat-up house from an estate, and we decided to create a masterpiece, which we did. And, of course, it was overpriced for the market. Interest rates were up at 9.5%. We took a horrendous ass-kicking, and the lesson I learned there is stay in the shallow end of the gene pool where you belong. You are not in the taste business, and we should have gone in and painted the sucker white and put some carpet in and marked it up a little and taken the money and run. And instead, we refinished all the hardwood floors and rebuilt all the double hung windows and put in a new kitchen and a massive landscape project. And our house was priced several $1,000s more than a cookie cutter market would bear. And so that lesson stuck with me for the rest of my life. And I've done maybe 4 or 5 pretty deals since then, only one of which actually worked, which was building the headquarters building for what is now Prologis in San Francisco. out in San Francisco Bay, but I had a premier location, tenants and financing in hand, and all I had to do was execute. So my project manager brought the taste to the market. She knew what she was doing. I did the outside, she did the inside. So I stay away from the taste market, but that's how I got started. So I spent 35 years doing warehouses. I built them, bought them, sold them, rehabbed them, financed them, leased them, managed them, all over the world. 4 walls and a roof, 4 feet off the ground. My constituents were truckers, people I could squat in the dust with and understand. And my other business essentially is middle income and low income housing. So those are the places where my wheelhouse is.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And you've got such a great amount of experience, even just with that brief kind of snapshot. I mean, there's so much that happens kind of even within that life or your career wise up to this point. But I love how you just right off the bat, you just dove in. So for those of our listeners, if you've got kids and they're around you, guess what? Like they're going to glean from you. So if you're willing to step out and kind of take on some challenge of getting outside of your comfort zone, right? It sounds like dad was an entrepreneur. So of course you saw that, and that normalizes that for you.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It's if you pass on the notion that you can get out there and do something on your own and take a chance and get your ass kicked and learn something, that is a great thing. And my son, the wise ass, works for my little company, and he's been the manager of one of our low income places. And that really teaches you the business. And he thinks all developers are nuts. So he has no desire to be a developer, but he is a really good property manager. And he has more stories than any human being should, because we deal with the true shallow end of the gene pool in our tenant mix. And he's seen some stuff.
Yep. I mean, over the years, even just my limited experience being in the business, depending on your price points and all that you just see all kinds of stuff. So I'm sure he's got some stories, especially where
there is a dark side to humanity. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. I mean, the best that we can do too is kind of, you work with what you've got, right? A lot of times like that.
We run a tight ship. We provide clean, safe, affordable housing. If you want to deal drugs or sell sex or beat on your neighbors or be filthy or destructive, we throw your ass out. And in the People's Republic of San Francisco, that's hard, but we do it anyway.
I love it. Yeah. And I love that you're doing that there too, right? Like, you're very well aware, of course, like every state is different, every country that you go, because you guys have done business around the world, every place that you go to, right? They're going to have their local regulations, their laws, all that kind of stuff is different. That works that way in the States too. So every place that you go, it's like, well, hey, you're bold enough to do low income or operate in California. Okay. Well, I mean, hey, people are the same no matter where you go. It's just a matter of like learning the local ropes for laws and regulation.
This is a very important point that I want to emphasize, and I'll try and give you a little story to emphasize this. I did a lot of business in across the United States in different jurisdictions, and in Japan and Singapore and Mexico, some in Europe. Every place is different. So every place we went, the first thing we did was find a local partner, because anytime you do something new, you're going to pay a stupid tax. You don't know what you're doing. So it's a learning experience. And one of the ways to help with the learning experience is to find a local partner. So when I went to Mexico, I ended up partnering with someone to build warehouse buildings that didn't know squat about warehouse buildings, but knew the political landscape in Mexico. So I said, and knew the business mores of Mexico. So I said, okay, here's the trick. In Mexico, deals are done at an 11% return. In the United States, they're done at an 8% return. If you learn how to do it my way, you're going to take 11% real estate and turn it into 8% real estate. And here's the bottom line for you. And you teach me Mexico, I'll teach you the warehouse business and the international investment business. And we had a fine partnership. And the guy who ran the shop also happened to be named Luis, which my mother named me because she didn't know any better. So we were what's called in Mexico, Tocayos, same name.
Yeah.
So we go to Mexico and I start building, and we're building basically a 900,000 foot building for Procter and Gamble. We got a piece of land. I got the land configured right, the warehouse configured right, and it turns out I can't get title insurance. Well, it's not something you think about in the United States. You just go into escrow and you get title insurance. You pay a little money for it. They don't have title insurance in Mexico. So I got to prove that I'm going to spend my company's money to buy big piece of dirt to build a 1,000,000-foot warehouse on. Do I own it? And it's just a minor consideration. Well, it turns out that we're buying it from a guy who bought it from an ejido. And an ejido was something that comes from the Mexican Revolution in 1910, and they gave 11-acre parcels to people in groups, but you didn't really own it. You only had kind of a leasehold interest in it. You couldn't hypothecate it. And the only way you can sell it is if everybody sells together. And there is a very elaborate process for this, I find out. So an entire squad of U.S. and Mexican lawyers are explaining to me how the ejido process works. And I said, fine, I got to prove up title. I want to know for damn sure. And you guys are going to tell me, and you're going to put your law firm's name on it, that I own this piece of dirt if I come up with the money to close escrow. Well, it turns out they go to the House of Records and there's little or nothing there. So we had to replicate the process, and we had to find the guy who ran the ejido, who had taken the money and gone to the Caribbean, and start the process over from scratch. I mean, you talk about brain damage in the extreme, but at the end of the day, I had what I thought was solid title. Well, that just never freaking occurred to me when I started this process. Let's say it that way. And then at the end of the day, Procter & Gamble Mexico had an option to purchase the thing from me. And so I came up with the option price, which was the moon and the stars, on the theory that they'd never exercised the option. But it turned out they did. So I'm beating on my Mexican partners to have all of the paperwork in order, the certificate of occupancy, all the inspections, all of the stuff I got from the engineers to prove that the concrete was the right mix and I had the appropriate level of rebar and everything. And the guys from P&G Mexico came in with a cashier's check and never asked for any of it. So it's just a different world. And anytime you do anything new, remember, you don't know squat and you're going to pay a stupid tax. So that's kind of my advice to anybody going into anything.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's actually awesome advice, because there's so much even just in that your story there. Too many people, a lot of times people don't get started, right? They don't jump in, they don't get, and obviously we're talking about international companies and these huge companies, and guys, don't overcomplicate it, right? It doesn't even need to be that you're going to go open up a 1,000,000-square-foot warehouse in a different country. We're not asking you, nobody's asking you to go do that, right? But even just stepping outside of your comfort zone, just getting started in real estate, doing whatever it is, there's going to be questions that you don't have the answer to, right? You're going to find somebody who knows at least the legwork, or at least knows the ground rules on wherever you're going to operate, and know that you're going to encounter challenges, know that you're going to encounter some kind of headwind, and you'll learn the lessons along the way.
And start slow. And the biggest mistake people who've had some success have is if they assume that because they know how to do A, they're going to be able to do B. And it took them years to learn how to do A, and they think they're going to just start with B with no startup at all. You got to learn B. So I want to find somebody who knows about B, put them in the deal, and take my time and learn something and do it a piece at a time until I'm good at it.
Yeah, but again, like you don't get there without even starting, right? Yes. It's like you fail forward, right?
Yeah. Well, and failure is the only teacher. Success just seduces you into thinking what you're doing. Failure is the teacher.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I love that you mentioned there of the stupid tax, and understanding like it's unavoidable. You want to try and, of course, mitigate as much as possible, right? That's connecting. That's you're connecting with somebody local who kind of knows that. But again, even the two of you, even working with somebody local, even working with your experience and knowledge, you still don't have the answers to everything. So like there's no sense in thinking that.
It's never the alligator you're watching that bites you in the ass. There's always something that comes up. And I'm recalling a phone call at one point. In order to build capital for the little company I'm part of now, we did a lot of merchant building. We built drugstores for Walgreens. Yeah, they'd tell us where they wanted to be. We'd find a piece of dirt. We'd agree on a rent. We'd buy the land, build the building, and sell it to a 1031 buyer. And at one point, we're breaking ground on a deal, and my partner's on the site, and I called him up, and he said, "How's it going?" He said, "Now I know why they call this Rocky Point." And I'm thinking, oh God, site work budget's in the toilet. We're out there with the hydraulic hammers trying to get the sewer lines in. Wasn't a line item in the budget. And we did extensive soil testing on the site, but didn't quite hit the ledge where all the rock was. But that's just how it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, and like that, as much as we try to prepare, there's just always going to be those variables that you just honestly you can't account for them. Nobody's going to be able to account for them. You can do the best that you can, right? You do your topography maps and all that kind of stuff. And hey, you won't know until you start digging.
Years ago, I hired a woman who worked for a big time financial institution to be one of my partners when I was doing development deals for Lincoln Property Company. And some off the wall thing came up in a deal we were building. And she said, we need to get a comprehensive checklist of all the things that can happen in the development process so we can go down and make sure that we checked all the boxes. And I said, if you can figure out what to put on the list, you let me know, because I get surprised every single time with something that I never expected.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's awesome. And I love that too, because as much experience, let's say, as you have, and this kind of goes back to the point you just made mention, you'll never know it all. So I think it's a mistake if we get overconfident in whatever it is that we're doing. Oh yeah, I know exactly. No, look, there's always a variable there that you're not aware of, or you're not accounting for, or something has changed. Right. It doesn't matter if you've been in the, I mean, I've been in the business only 20 years, and trust me, completely different from 20 years ago when I started to how things are done now. Right. And so, yeah, I can only imagine the things that you've seen in the different cycles. And I'm kind of curious too, like your kind of take on where we are. You made a mention earlier about that flip and that over rehabbing that you guys did, and you're selling into 9% interest rates. Well, we're all of the, the market is cyclical. We're back to around those interest rates. The lesson still holds: don't over rehab, stay in your lane, know what the comps and all that kind of good stuff are. Where do you see us going now? We're in a different period of the market.
There is a sea change that's gone on for plus or minus 15 years. We had interest rates that were irrational. And when I was a big dog corporate guy, I did lots of presentations in front of people who were seeking contracts, who pretended to like me, whether they did or not. And I kept saying, borrow now, borrow long. Inflation adjusted interest rates at these levels are utterly irrational. Money's on sale, and this is going to end, and it's going to end soon. And for 10 years, I was wrong. And now I turned out to be right, but eventually. So what's happened is that we have gone back to a normal rate environment. So a whole lot of deals were done with 3 and 4% money that now make no sense with 6 and 7 and 8% money. And if you're trying to finance an office building today, it's 10, 12, 14% or whatever number it is. In my view, this is here forever. So we have to change our whole view of leverage. So when I was early on in the business, standard mortgage rates for a first-rate commercial deal were 9%. When I bought my first apartment buildings in San Francisco, it was 8.5%. That's how it was. So the trick with leverage is you should never use leverage unless it's positive, meaning that the free and clear yield on your deal exceeds the rate of interest you're paying, preferably the constant. If it's the other way around, you're losing value every day because the leverage is decreasing the value of your property. So the reason the Japanese did all the stupid deals in the 70s and 80s is they were able to borrow money for next to nothing in Japan and come over here and make a 3 or 4% yield deal, and it made sense to them. So that's why they did so many overpriced deals in Hawaii and in the big cities in the United States. So it's a new world. And based on the debt level of governments in the United States and Europe and Japan and China, I don't think rates are ever going down again. And so somebody's got to show up to these treasury auctions and bid. And I think the 10-year treasury is at 4 or more forever, for the foreseeable future, because the debt isn't going away. The baby boom is retiring, Social Security Trust Fund and Medicare Trust Fund going broke. We're running $2 trillion a year deficits. So the government's in the market competing for funds. They're going to have to pay for funds. Everything's pegged off the 10-year Treasury. 10-year Treasury's at 4. That means rates are at 6 or 7, and that's the way it is.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, again, we're talking more of a macro picture here for those of you guys who are not kind of keyed into a bunch of that. But trust me, all of that affects what you're doing, right? Like if you're listening and you're a fix and flipper, or you're like, Steve, well, this doesn't affect me because I'm a vacation rental operator, and trust me, it will all affect you. It's
going to work its way all through the system and reprice everything. So I say cap rates are up probably 100 basis points in perpetuity. So deal that you bought at a 5, you think it's a good deal, you're going to play hell selling it at a 5. So it just repriced the industry across all product types everywhere.
Yeah, no, for sure. And then where are you seeing, let's say, I know you've had a lot of experience, let's say on the warehouse side, we work in kind of the multifamily side and more the residential. Do you see any opportunity on the horizon? Like now that obviously you made mention there earlier, like office is a real challenge, especially within any of the lenders, because they have so much exposure, let's say on that side, and all of the work from home stuff. And we're still feeling the effects of COVID kind of play out. And we knew that would happen. It takes time for all of this stuff to work through the system. But where do you see opportunity wise coming up?
The two key things to look at, well, the three key things to look at, and we've talked about the first one, which is availability of funds. Then the second is replacement cost. So everything is key to replacement cost eventually. If you end up paying for something more than it costs to replace it, you're going to get your ass kicked sooner or later. Because, I mean, you've been in the Texas market. When I was working warehouse space, I was a buyer in the 20s and a seller in the 30s. If it was priced at $20-some a foot and it was decent real estate, I'd buy it. And then everybody over 2 feet tall go out and build some more. And so, but when the prices got up to the 30s, I was a seller. Because you just knew, and we did a gigantic study of warehouse rents in Dallas over a long period of time and determined that inflation adjusted, they never went up because it was too easy to build. And so you're looking at supply demand dynamics. And the problem with the office market today is that the demand has dropped because of at-home work, because of what we're doing right this minute. The technology improved a little bit and the habits changed completely. So X amount of work is going to go on this way from here forward, which lowers the demand for office space, which means we got too much office space. It's going to take 5 years to cure the problem. And office construction has stopped. So eventually supply and demand will meet each other. Same thing happened with retail. Online sales come along. They're now 16% of the business. We started out with 3,200 regional malls in the United States. We'll end up with 800. So the rest of the regional malls are going to be something else or vacant land. And so you got to kind of look at those two dynamics, replacement cost, supply, demand, combined with the financial environment, and you'll figure out where the hell the market is. So in multifamily, you always got to be wary of flat spots. Phoenix, Dallas, Houston, Atlanta, Denver, it's easy to build. So those markets are going to get overbuilt. Those are timing markets. You need to buy in when things are in deep trouble and either get out or when the market recovers, or be prepared to ride out the cycles, because they're going to happen. Any place it's easy to build. In San Francisco, it's brain damage to build, but if you get it built, it's very hard to replicate. So I'm getting for SRO rents, I'm getting $7 a square foot for a room. And why is that? Because nobody can build anything, and the cities try to build low-income units. It's costing them $1 million a unit to build a one-bedroom apartment. I mean, give me a break. So my rent looks cheap in comparison. So, and the same unit in Cincinnati would rent for $400 a month, or maybe $2 a square foot. So it's all about the supply and demand dynamics. And right now, supply of multifamily in the Sun Belt is a little overbuilt, and it's about in equilibrium everywhere else. So you may find some foreclosure opportunities in the Sun Belt if you can buy right and you can buy Cs and upgrade them to Bs. There's some money to be made. If you got a major amount of intestinal fortitude, you can buy office space. Office space is selling right today for 25 cents on replacement costs, some lower. I mean, I got some friends who bought a good building in San Francisco for $150 a foot, replacement costs somewhere between $800 and $1,000 a foot. And I said, guys, I'm so old I don't even buy green bananas. And this is a great deal, but it's going to take 7 years, and I ain't going to live 7 years, so I'm not a player. But you've got a hell of a deal here. And an office building, a decent office building in Oakland, just sold for $65 a foot. My former boss at Prologis is buying suburban office buildings and tearing them down to build warehouses. So if you have intestinal fortitude and you're prepared to go 5 to 7 years, you can make money buying office buildings.
Yeah. And that's the thing, right? Then that's another piece of advice to investors. It's like, understand your time horizon, right? Because our time horizon and is not, like I said, it's not yours, right? And so like, you have to understand that with your investment strategy going into it. Okay, do I have reserves to do this? Like, does that timeline align with, let's say, our investors' capital or whatever it is situation that you're working in? So it can all work, but you have to have the right assumptions going into it, for one, but also two, like, be in alignment with what's happening in the market. Like, have your finger on the pulse. And two, like, I love that you mentioned that you're still doing deals in San Francisco, right? So like, you still have operations in California. And so there's money to be made in every market, but you have to, what is your unfair advantage, right? Where is your, as we in here in Hawaii would say, like, what's your puka? Like, well, what is your little niche, right? What that you can carve out where you have an unfair advantage, and identify that in your local market.
It's about rate of return. So you say, okay, how much money, how much time, how much grief, how many toilets do I have to unplug? How many regulatory barriers are there? What are the political risks? What are the supply demand risks? And what rate of return justifies this? So my friends who bought the office building are going to make IRR in the 20s or 30s, but they're going to work their ass off to get there. So if you're buying a net lease deal with a creditworthy tenant on a 20-year lease with inflation-adjusted rents at Main and Main, maybe a 5% return is fine. If I'm buying a pool hall in Barstow that's a part-time meth lab, I got to have a 20 or a 25. So it's time, effort, and risk related to the expected return, including appropriate levels of contingency for the alligator that's going to bite you in the ass that you didn't look at.
Yeah, no, that right there in a nutshell is the formula, right? Like, that's exactly it. So, and then you don't have that too, like, just getting in. And so Luis is definitely giving us from his own personal experience. And not only that, but again, like, you would have a lot of contemporaries that would have been operating in the space as well, like, over the years, right? Like, we also get to, you're a fool if you don't learn from others' mistakes in addition to your own, right? Like, you have to get out and try your own, but then you have to also be mindful of what your other people are experiencing in the market as well, so you can incorporate that into your own strategy. So yeah, no, I love that.
One of the best panels I ever listened to was 3 big time developers sitting in a room talking about the worst deal they ever made. And what they learned from the experience. And it's the bad deals that teach you. And I defy you to find anybody that's made only good deals.
Yeah, it's not possible. If you're in the business long enough, you will get bit by that alligator.
I built maybe 50 buildings in the Bay Area, and when I drive by 45 of them, I'm proud. The other 5, I avert my eyes.
Well, like I said, if you stick around in the business long enough, it's inevitable. Like, it has to happen. So, well, I know that you've also, and I love you being able to share with me, share with our audience. And I know you've also written several books as well. What was the impetus for some of that? Was that just kind of sharing some of the knowledge or I know you mentioned off camera that it's something that you enjoy, which is amazing. But yeah, what's the impetus for writing the books?
So I'm the world's luckiest human being because I found a way to make a living that interests me so much. I do it in my old age for giggles. And that's the reason I write books, is for giggles, and hopefully convey a little information and some insight to people, give them a few laughs, and I enjoy the process. So the books I'd recommend, and they're on Google, they're on Amazon, they're cheap, paperback or Kindle. Real Estate 101, which is kind of a beginner's guide to the business, every phase of the business, industrial, office, retail, multifamily, single family, and just kind of how to look at various product types. And then Street Dog MBA is kind of lessons learned throughout my life of how I came to the principles of operating a business and investing based on mostly on screw ups, but based on and kind of little stories about what I tried to do and what ended up happening and what I think I learned as a result. And then I've got Street Dog Negotiator, which is basically a framework for how to do a negotiation. And then I'm coming out in a few weeks with Street Dog Manager, which is how I think companies ought to be run, principles for how to run an organization. So, and what I'm trying to do is set a framework. So in Street Dog Manager, what I'm saying is you are not the leader of an organization. You're a servant of the organization. Your prestige and your compensation come from the success of the organization. So you work for the people in the organization. They don't work for you. And your job is to lead them in a fashion that gets you to sustainable profitability. And you need to do what needs to be done to do that and forget about your own ego. In the Negotiator book, what I'm trying to pitch is the notion of indifference. So I'm trying to approach every negotiation not caring whether it's a success or not. So I walk into the room with a mental or physical list of the things I need to get out of the deal and maybe some of the things I'd like, kind of the cake and the icing. If I can get the cake and a little of the icing, we got a deal. If I can't, get up and walk out of the room and say, I'm sorry, we couldn't do this, and keep walking. Quite often you'll be called back, but mostly your attitude has to be indifference. Here's my price. If you like it, fine. If you don't, I'll try somebody else. And AMF. And if you have that, if you go into if you try and organize your life so you never need to make a deal, then you're going to be a whole lot better off. And so the whole notion of he who cares least wins, or she who cares least wins in any negotiation is fine. And when I get up to leave, the last thing I say is, you did a great job. You really kicked my ass. I'm straggling out of here with some scraps, and you get the rest. And that's the way it is. And leave your ego at the door and come in not caring whether the deal makes or not.
Yeah, oh, that's awesome advice. I love that. I love that.
That's what I'm trying to convey with the books, and I write them for the hell of it. It ain't like I'm making any money as an author, I assure you.
But honestly, that's why you're the person to do it, because of course you've got the experience to do it. You don't need to do it, and so what you're getting, like through the books, let's say, is, hey, I'm in it to serve you, right? Yeah. I'm here to provide value to you. I don't need to do this.
The object, and one of the reasons I was popular as a public speaker is, number one, I told jokes, and number two, I worked for free. But number three, no self-promotion, and focus on providing some take-home value to the people you're talking to, so you're not wasting their time.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. I love that. I love that, and that comes across even just speaking to you here this our brief conversation. I get that. I totally get that. So I appreciate that. Well, right now is the time on our show where we transition to what we call our fire round, just a little brief kind of Q&A, a little lighter, more fun questions. That's something you're up for?
Yep, absolutely.
Awesome. All right, first question. So what is your best book recommendation outside of your own? What are your best go-tos?
Second place. I love reading history, because history is mistakes my ancestors made. So there's a section in Thucydides' History of the Peloponnesian War about the lawsuit culture in Athens, ruining the society and the economy. And that's from almost 3,000 years ago. And so you read history to see the screw-ups that people made. And interestingly enough, I've been reading a lot of histories of World War II, and only now are the real failures being talked about, of the things that were done really wrong, and the stupid mistakes that were made based on ego and posturing. So anytime you can read history, I think it's a good way to get perspective on life, a history of any kind, about anything. And the other thing I recommend is The Economist, which I read every week, because it kind of gives you a view of what's going on in the rest of the world. And the people who run The Economist are very out front about their underpinnings, their biases, their view of the world. So you know where they're coming from, and you might disagree with them, but at least you understand. And most of the commentary you get in life, people don't talk about what their biases are. They just talk to you as if, well, this is the truth. The Economist doesn't do that. They say, we're a free trade rag, and we believe in the social safety net, all this stuff. These are our beliefs, and this is our analysis, and this is what's going on in Central Africa and Pakistan. And so it gives you, it broadens your thinking about how to look at the world. So those are my two recommendations.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And you're right. If you think that you're politically agnostic, or everybody's got a lens in which they view the world, right? So that doesn't change whenever, even operating in business. We'd like to think that it does, but that's not the reality of things. And so, yeah, no, I appreciate that.
One of the things I talk about in the management book is hiring people with a different lens. Because if you just hire people who are like you have the same biases, the same wheelhouse, the same weaknesses, and you exacerbate your strengths, but you also exacerbate your weaknesses. So you want to hire people who are different than you, not the same as you.
Oh, that's great. And that covers your blind spots. Because again, you don't,
which you all have.
Right. Everybody, we all do. So no, that's great. That's great advice. All right. Next question. What would you consider your superpower to be?
My superpower, developed over many years, is good real estate instincts. I can mostly look at a deal and figure out what ought to happen pretty damn rapidly, just because the signals go off. I can see danger signals. I can look at a deal and figure out where the problems are going to be pretty well right away. And so that's my wheelhouse. And you develop instincts through experience and through trial and error. And then you get to the point where you can look at something. And Malcolm Gladwell has a book on this subject about that people's instant thinking on an issue, and the instant thinking works for people who are really experienced in a field. So he talks about the Getty Museum buying a fake Greek statue, and they did an intense amount of research to authenticate it, all of which turned out to be horseshit. But people who knew about Greek statuary could take one look at the thing and say it's a fake. So cultivating an instinct and developing it, and I think that's a superpower. So I'm good at real estate because I got scars all over my body.
Yeah, no, and that's absolutely true. That's what I said. Like, you meet anybody who thinks that they know it all, it's like, that's always a red flag. It's like, if they tell you they can't learn anything new, no, there's always more to learn, and it's dangerous.
Yeah.
When you get to that point, or you get that far, or adopt that mindset rather.
I'm also a certified wise ass, if you hadn't gathered that up there. So I consider that a superpower.
That is a superpower.
Yeah.
All right, then last question. If you could go back in time and talk to your 20-year-old self, what advice would you have for them?
Embrace the now. Enjoy the minutes you have. And as you get toward the end, you look back and say, there was a lot of things I did in places I've been where I should have paid more attention and not moved on to the next thing. Be more patient. Look at the sky on a pretty day. Enjoy your friends some more. Embrace life for what it is. Don't run off to your phone. Live in the present.
Yeah, stop and smell the roses.
Yes.
Like this.
Yeah.
This is
and the gladiolas and other flowers that I can't name.
No, absolutely. And that's great advice. It's easy for us, especially in our culture now. Everything is so fast paced, instant gratification, these phones that we have in our pocket, right? We don't need to read a book necessarily to go get some information, let's say, out of it. But gosh, you dive into some classic works, and there's just so much out there to kind of stop and slow down the pace a little bit and enjoy.
The other thing is that experiences are more important than things. And the older I get, the more things I throw away and the more I embrace experience. And if I'm blowing money, I blow money on experience, not things. And my wardrobe consists of sweatsuits, and my meals consist of hamburgers and vegetables. That things no longer interest me. And the more I think about the things I had, the more they were not worth the trouble.
Oh, that's awesome. And it's a great, like I said, it's a great point of perspective. One that a lot, of course, that we're able to glean from you, and then just operating at a different life stage, being in a different life stage where you come to that appreciation. So that's good. That's wonderful. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. If our audience wants to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to connect with you? Is it just through the books? Is it, do you have a site?
Through the books, or I take emails, lbelmonte@7hb.com. I'm happy to answer a question. And in my semi-retirement years, you'll get a wise ass remark in return if you want it. And I'm not investing in anything except my own deals. So no sense hustling me. And I've been hustled by the best. But if you got a question, I'm happy to try with an answer, and you'll get something succinct and cynical.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, I really appreciate you hopping on with me and sharing some of your day with us and the listeners. I've personally gained from it. So I've enjoyed our conversation, and I'll speak for them and say that they have also. But no, I really appreciate you, and would love to have you back on sometime and kind of see how your San Francisco real estate is doing, and what kind of new projects you get going. What kind of new book maybe you're working on.
Yeah, I will give you a report from the People's Republic of San Francisco. I'll let you know how it's going.
So, well, thanks so much, Liz. Have a wonderful day.
You too. Best wishes to you.
Well, thank you. Wonderful recording with Luis Belmonte. Gosh, he's got so much experience in the business, not only real estate, but just life experience. And that can't help but to come through. And we need that. We need, it's easy for us to become masters of our own universe, think that we know it all, especially if you get some wins and you get some experience. It's easy to think that we have all of the answers. And it's so important for us to always learn from those that have come before us. For one, it's going to help us to avoid pitfalls. But two, there's just so many things that we're just not aware of. And we need that new perspective. We need that fresh perspective coming from people who are further down the road from us. Guys, well, if you're interested in investing with us, go to tricityequity.com. You can learn more about us. If you haven't subscribed and you haven't left us a review, what are you doing? Go give us a thumbs up. Leave some comments on what were your great takeaways from this show. Go share the episode with the others. We would love to be able to get that feedback, continue to bring on great guests like Luis and others as we continue to record the show. So make sure that you're sharing the episode. As if you're also interested in meeting people in person here in Hawaii, if you live on Oahu, or if you're visiting, if you live in the islands, or you're coming out for a vacation and you want to kind of pop in, maybe do some networking, join our group, Facebook group, Hello Multifamily and more. You can also find us on meetup.com, Bigger Pockets, wherever you can find kind of the local meetups. We're there and we'd love to meet you in person. Guys, it's going to be it for today. Go out, take some action, go out, listen to some books, learn some new things, apply some lessons, and we will see you on the next episode. Have a great one. Aloha.